We're on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, and this is about the last piece in the first parak, and then we'll get to start the second parak tonight. The Mishnah was talking about certain things that you can do Meleches Hedjot and not Meleches Uman, and it talked about making a makeh, a parapet, a fence on your roof and your merpeset. It talked about filling in the cracks so you wouldn't get leakage, but you couldn't use certain specialized equipment. It talked about fixing the locks and the hinges, and the last thing talked about and all of this has a tzorach hamoed, and it says kol kvoshim sheyochel lechol mehem b'moed kovsham. Any pickling, any food that you can pickle and prepare in time to use for Yontif, you can do that on Chol Moed. Pickling itself is it's a longer period of time. It takes a longer period of time than cooking, so it may sit for 3 days, 4 days, a week, whatever it is, until it becomes completely cured. So that's the topic, and the Gemara is actually going to finish off the parak with a couple of stories about fish, some fish tales. Okay, so Kvashim Shu Yachol Echol B'Moed Kovshan. So the Gemara gives the following story: Bedisa Leboy Kavre. Bedisa was a river. Bedisa, I think, was the name of a river, and it dried up, right? And the Bedisa River at Lavoy dried up, and there were kavre, and there were fish that were lying around. So somehow the water receded, and all these fish suddenly became exposed. Now, because the fish, and it was chalamoid, because the fish were exposed, what would happen if you didn't collect the fish? They would die. Besides stinking, there would be a loss. So Azul Kuli Alma. So everybody from the town of Lavoy went over to the river and saw it, and they went to collect them, they went to catch them, and I see kavre, and they brought in these fish. So Sharalahu Rava lemimlich minayu. So Rava permitted them to salt from these fish. So they went to collect fish, and they obviously had more than they could eat. So Rava says the ones that you have left over you can salt. This was the way they preserved fish, right? Like salted herring, like salted, like smoked fish. What smoking is putting the smoke and the spices in place of the salt, right? So Amalei Abaye. So Abaye said to Rava, when he allowed the people of Lavoy to then salt all these fish on Chalamoid B'Hotznan, Vashim Shuyachal Echol Mehem B'Moed Kovshan. Says it's only permissible to salt or cure or put in vinegar those which you can eat on Chalamoid, you can do. And obviously you're telling the people now, with the fish that they brought in, which is so many, they're going to salt them, and there's no way they're going to finish it by the end of Yontif. So this seems to go against what the Mishnah says. So the answer was Amalei Kevan the Meikara Daita de Achilos Nayu, says, seeing that they really brought them up to eat then. In other words, they really intended to eat them then. But v'i shavik lahu paste, and if whatever is left over from what remained that they didn't, they couldn't exactly tell how much they had, and if they don't salt them, what's going to happen? They'll go bad in a very short period of time. So it's k'pragmatya ha'avidami. It's like a business that'll be a loss, and therefore v'shari. Okay, so in other words, really, what he was saying is, I didn't tell them to go bring the fish in, that many fish. They brought fish in, and it happens to be that was left over because there was so many fish, so that which is left, instead of throwing it away, it'll be a hefsid meruba, they're allowed to kind of therefore salt it, even though they won't get to eat it till after Yontif, because their intention really was to eat the fish on Yontif. Okay, that's one version. Gemara is a second version. Second version, it's a little more radical. Iko di amrei. Shara lahu Rava meitzad mezel asnaihu umimlach. That Rava actually allowed the people to go down, and he said you can collect all the fish now, as many fish as you have, and you can salt them and prepare them for after Yontif. The first version of the story was the people came to him, they had the fish. He said, well, you got the fish ready, you didn't intend to keep them, but now you have leftover salt. Because here it looks like he's lechatchila allowing them. He says he commanded them. He told them. He said, go out and bring back fish and salt them. So Abaye says to them in the second version, it's the same Abaye, says, Banan kfashim shiyochel lechol mehen b'moed kavshan. But the Mishnah says only if you can eat them on Yantif, you can salt them. Tzanan. So Amalei, so he said to him, Hani nami misachle agav itzisa. So he answered as follows. And it's hard to really understand a little bit what this means. When you prepare fish, you salt it, and there's a process where the salt replaces, I guess, the fish oils and juices. In other words, the salt is going to be absorbed into the actual fish. But it takes a while for that salting process to take place. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you wanted to eat those fish right away, so you actually apparently could press the fish and squeeze the salt out, and then the fish were edible. So in other words, he's saying, you're right, I told them they can salt the fish, but you know what, in the interim, if they wanted to eat the fish they have, they could still eat them. You tell me, well, they put there in these buckets of salt. Yeah, but they could take them out of the buckets of salt and squeeze the salt out. So they're really edible for now. You're right, the process is really, the truth is, it's a bit of a charade, it's a bit of a facade. They're really preparing it for after Yontif. But if you want, they could really eat it now. You tell me you can't eat it now, still in the process? No, they could, because even fish that's being salted, you can take it out, press out the salt, and the fish is still edible.
Before it's complete.
Before it's completely salted.
Yeah.
Before it's completely salted, you have to take the salt out and squeeze out the salt, and then the fish becomes like a dried fish. I guess like a beef jerky or something like that. It's a dried fish that the salt is out and it's still considered edible.
They sell in the supermarket, it's kosher, with salted cod. Take cod and they salt it. It's, I guess, like a cardboard. And you take it and you soak it. I don't know what you do. You soak it, then you...
The Portuguese are big on this.
Yeah, but it's Newfoundland. And you rehydrate it, and the salt comes out, then you cook it. I don't know how you cook it.
So you it's been salted, then you put it in
cardboard.
water.
Remember, it looks like cardboard. You see it like cardboard.
It's like salted and dried.
Yeah, it's just the salt sucks the water. It's like cardboard. And you buy it, and then you put it in water to hydrate it again.
Right, but what this looks like is that they didn't rehydrate it. They squeezed the salt out and they desiccated it.
Before it was fully hard like a board.
Correct.
So it was like half cured, whatever.
Right. So that was still edible. Yeah. Whatever it is, as he's saying, he allowed them to do this.
Why do you allow it?
Because the fish we just mentioned the river dried up.
I know, but why do you do it?
They didn't collect the fish would be gone.
So therefore you're allowed to do it?
So it's a hefset, so it's a big loss.
Does this count as a hefset? The fish didn't belong to them.
So the charade that he's using is saying you're really collecting for Yontif itself.
Right.
That's the second. The second approach is, the first approach says, yeah, you know what, you have left over. If you don't use it now, it's going to be a hefset because you already collected them. The first one, he's saying, go down and collect them. And they say, well, is that a hefset? The answer is, it's not a hefset, but you can really have fish for the rest of Yontif. The reality is you're not going to have fish for the rest of Yontif, and the reality is you put them into salt, so they're not going to be really edible till after Yontif, but you still could use them on Yontif if you squeeze them out. So he's trying to work a way to allow them to use these fish, because the recognition obviously is, behind this, if you didn't do it now, the fish will be gone. This is Chol Moed. Moed means Chol Moed. Because Chol Moed, really you can't do a lot of difficult work that doesn't really apply to Yontif.
But you can prepare food.
Right, but this is talking about significant amount of food. This is not preparing just food for Yontif. This is think of this as a fish just jumping out of the river.
Leftovers for weeks.
Well, that's exactly. It's leftovers for weeks, and it's a lot of work to process it, and it's not for Yontif. Think of this as just like a bonus largesse for the people of Lavoy. All this fish that they didn't expect, and somehow the water table went down, and the fish were caught. The fish were left over. And you've seen pictures of droughts in sometimes Africa, and you see the water hole dries up, and you see the fish lying around, right? So it's not the fact the fish would smell; it's the fact that they could benefit. So how can you make them benefit? So the halachic fiction is the fact you can use them for Yontif. But having said that, the Gemara is now going to get into a whole. Okay. Some of the Rishonim say the river dried out. Some say they actually were doing work and they turned the river right? They diverted the river, now left the fish behind. And a third shot he mentions here is actually that the river overflowed. Exactly the opposite. It says Yavshu, but the river overflowed its banks, and the fish were stuck in the fields when the water receded. So it's all the same thing. So at any rate, the Gemara now gets onto this and talks about cases where people actually had ate these pressed fish. So it looks like it was actually a delicacy. Kihad Shmuel, like case of Shmuel, Avdulay Shitin Itisi. They made for him 60 pressed fish. It's hard to know how big these fish were. Maybe like little herring. Sardines or something. Whatever it was, but in other words, you see, that was like, he ate and ate and ate. It was tasty.
60 sardines still on.
Right. Shitin Sitsi Bi'achan, he ate them. Whatever it is. Think of 60.
Even sardines a lot. Sardines
depends what else is on the meal.
When you buy a can of sardines, there's 4 or 5 sardines in it.
Well, there's small sardines.
Okay.
There's smaller sardines too.
Yeah, small sardines.
Oh, really, really tiny. Okay.
Okay.
Baby sardines.
Baby herring. I don't know. Okay.
Tiny, tiny little ones.
We don't eat this because there's nothing to eat. Okay. Now, Rava Ikla Lebei Reish Galusa. Rava came to the house of the Reish Galusa. This is like the exilarch, the head of the community. So they're going to feed him good. So Abdullah, they made for him Shitin Itisivi Achal. They made for him 60 pressed fish, and he ate them. So you see, that's not just it's edible. This is like high class. Right. So Rav Ikla Levei Rav. Rav came to the house of Rav. Rav came to the house of study. Shapir Aisla Kamay. I'm sorry. Rav Ikla Levei Rav Shapir. He came to the house of Rav Shapir. Aisla Kamayo Hahu Kavra. They brought for him to eat different fish. And what did they bring for him? Tilsa Bishula. 1/3 was cooked. Tilsa Milcha. 1/3 was salted. But Tilsa Tevya, which actually looks like it means it was like fried. But some of the Rishonim say that the tevya really meant that they were pressed out. So I'm not sure they fried them after they pressed them or something. So in other words, but also once again it relates to the pressing story. So then you see that this actually was really edible, and therefore Rava was allowing them to eat it because it was really edible for Yontiv as well. Okay. Now the Gemara ends off with a couple of stories that Rav asked his fisherman friend. Amar Rav, or probably fishmonger. Amar Rav, Amali Aida Ada Tzaida. Ada the Tzaida, Ada the fishman, told me the following important things, which is, you're going to really jump out of your seat when you hear this. Kavra samach l'misrachayu mali. Fish, right before they go rotten, are the best. Mm-hmm. The best time to eat the fish is right before they go bad. People are shaking their heads.
It's aged. Okay.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Tosa says, he says, in our day, if we would do that, you get sick. So it's only was manazeh, tovsim sakana lemecha samach l'sirachon. You're going to get sick. Obviously, it's just about to rot. What do you mean? Just because the pathogens are already in the fish. They just haven't really come to the forefront. And it brings other cases. So Tosa says, basically, it's on the 4th line. V'shema nishtanu k'mo refuah sheb'shas she'eino tovos b'zman hazeh. So when he said that things have changed medically, what worked then, right? We know certain medications didn't work today, and so certain tevas as well work. The fish were different, or the rotting was different, or people's
tastes were different.
Tastes or abilities to stomach things were different. And then Tosfos suggests that maybe that the rivers of Bavel were different. They were better. The waters were better, and therefore, right before it rotted, they had all kinds of ameliorative effects were in it. Okay.
We don't know what it means exactly. We're not sure exactly what it means.
Correct. And then Tosfos, the third answer is kavra was a type of a fish. Not every fish is like this. Means this kind of fish, right? But the bottom line is, don't try this at home. Okay. Okay. My father always taught us fish stinks from cup.
Yeah, fish stinks from cup.
Right. There you go. It's rotten from the top. Now, Rav is another statement. Rav Amali Ada Tzaida. Another statement from Ada, the fishmonger, the fishman. It's a funny kind of statement. It says as follows: Kavra tavye bi'achve. The fish are cooked with its sister, which means they're cooked with salt. The fish live in the salty waters, so their cognate sister is salt. The asuke biavuha, they are fired with their father. The father is going to be the water. They're cooked in water, right? Umichle b'brai, and they are eaten. Bray is their brother. I guess the first one, Achle, is their brother. Bray is their son. Bray is their son. The son is the broth that comes out of the fish. Okay, and ishte aleya avuha, and then you drink with it. Their father, once again, that becomes water again. So I don't know what this means, but this is just the end of Peri kinds of things. The Amar Rav, and Rav's got another one.
The fish in the first story, they're from a river. It's not salt water.
We don't know.
Well, I mean, I assume it's from a river. It's fresh water. Huh?
Well, right. So it might be might be brackish even. You know.
Yeah, it's possible could be an estuary or something.
Right. I'm saying it also could be brackish. There could be like all kinds of minerals in the water as well. So we don't know. But you're right. It could be. It's usually probably in Bavel there are a lot of canals, so probably with fresh water in between the Tigris and Euphrates, tons of canals. Yeah. Tigris and Euphrates, I imagine fresh water. Yeah, sure. Right.
Rivers usually.
The only one that was salty is Hudson, the Hudson River.
Part of it. Yeah.
Part of it. But I'm saying that was the Chiddush. So when Henry Hudson found New York and he went up the river, he was surprised how far up it was. Salty? It was salty.
Oh, it was far up salty? I don't know.
How far up in those days was a little boat. It was far up because it's such a big river and it goes into the ocean. Okay, now we're going to come one or two more. Amarav, Amali Adatzaida, Kavra Tachla, V'chelva, fish, and Tachla is some kind of plant like a cress, with milk. Liton Gufa, V'lo Liton Poraya. It's good for your body, but it's not good. Poraya is a word for bed. The word for bed is poraya because people do pruravu in their bed. So that's actually a common word. Okay? Now, this is a very strange kind of thing. So after you eat fish, you should stay awake. You shouldn't go to sleep. The question is, why not?
Did you see milk? Did you see with milk?
He says with cholov, yes. If you have milk, I guess.
We don't do that. We don't do it.
Oh, yes.
We do. There's Sfardim dough.
Yeah, we do.
This seems to say they had it with milk.
I remember that Sfardim dough. I got mixed up there a little bit. Okay.
Right, but this, so he was.
He was not Ashkenaz, okay.
Okay, whatever it was. Okay. So it means after you eat this, your body should be exercised, right? You should use your body, and you shouldn't use your bed. Now, as I said, once again, the question is why not? So the Rishonim will give a couple of reasons. First of all, they say that this was actually very tasty, and when you eat tasty things that have a strong taste, there's an aftertaste. So part of enjoying food is sometimes the remainder of what that taste remains in your mouth, what lingers in your mouth, and therefore, if you go right to bed, you're going to miss out on it. That's one suggestion. The other thing, the other suggestion, which is a little more risque, but maybe more closer to the MS, it says that these kind of foods can make more shechvat zera, and therefore, if you go to bed right away, you may have a nocturnal emission, and therefore you have to stay awake so this can wear off. Then you can go to bed later on. Okay, these are fish tales, fishmonger tales, right? Okay. V'yom Rav, and one final thing. The fish person told me, Kavra tachli v'chelba, that fish, cress, and milk, maya with water, v'lo shikra, and not with wine. And if you have to have wine, shikra v'lo chamra. Then if you have wine, better wine and not beer. So first, better water. Maya v'lo shikra.
For cooking with, or for drinking with?
For drinking with, for eating with. Okay. It's been, in other words, after you finish eating, it's a maya v'lo shikra. You should have water afterwards and not wine. And if you have to have wine, you should have wine, and if you have to have something alcoholic, wine and not beer. I don't know why. Okay. These were
White wine.
Well, white wine, correct.
I don't know.
Well, these were
Here they said mead.
mead.
Mead is honey wine.
For what? For shechar? For shechar or for chama? Shechar.
Not meat.
Maybe shecher might be meat because it would say yain otherwise. Okay, good. In other words, it's just telling you things that we don't know why they work or how they work, but apparently these were beliefs in those days. Okay. So, this is the end of the first parak. The third parak of Masechet Moed Kattan deals with, by the way, a lot of Avelis. Okay, and the third parak, I should say, is the second half of the Masechta. We're up to Daf Yud Aleph. The next parak goes about 4 or 5 dapim, and then about the Yud Tet Vav or so, it goes into the third parak, which is a long parak, which is really fundamental for learning many halachot about Avelut. But this becomes a transition type of parak because the Mishnah we're about to see, you'll see seems to mix together Chol Moed and Avelut. A person is starts doing work, and then it either becomes Yantiv and Chol Moed, and he doesn't do it, the work will deteriorate, such as he's pressing olives, or the next Mishnah pressing grapes. Or conversely, or related thing, if a person never becomes an Ovel can't do work either. So what is permissible, what's not permissible? So the two are related. In other words, the first parak at the beginning combined or put in connection Chol Moed and Shemitah. Right, both about working the land. Second parak seems to combine more Chol Moed and Avelut. Okay, or compare them. I don't want to say combine them. So the Mishnayos really talk about these kinds of scenarios, and then the Gemara tries to explain what they are and gets back to Chol Moed. Okay. Says, if you could, the walls don't really close. Okay, thank you. Okay. So, wait for Archie to come back in the second parak. And the scenario is when you wanted to press olives, you had to put them into some kind of basin, and then that they would begin the process of getting softer, so that you could squeeze out the juice, and then after a while you would turn them over, and when you turn them over, then the other side would get soft, and then you would put them into the Beit Habad, which was the oil press, and you begin to press down. But the moment that you turn them over, the moment that you turn over to the second side, you have a limit of the olives. You have a limited amount of time before you can then process them, or else they're going to start to rot, and then you won't get the oil out. Also, it won't be edible, or the oil will be not ruined, will be rancid. Correct. So the Mishnah says as follows: Misha hafach et zeisav, person who had already turned over his zeitim, so he's on the second side, and he's putting them there that they're going to start to. He's getting ready to squeeze them. The iru avel, and before Yantif, he became an avel, so he was not able to finish the process because an avel can't do malacha, or ones. Or something else happened that he was just unable to complete the process of squeezing or getting the oil out of his zaitim. O shetu polim, or workers tricked him. In other words, he arranged with workers to come to go do the work, and they just didn't show up. It was a union strike, wildcat strike, or whatever it was, he got misled. So here he is, and he counted on the workers to do it in time for Yantif, and he can't. So it's now Chol Moed. So Toin Koro Rishona, it's permissible for him to put the first beam on top of the zaitim and turn it once, so that some of the oil can be squeezed out. Basically, you put them into the vat. You put there's a big board on top, and then you begin to exert pressure. And the pressure of the board and the beginning of turning it will force the oil to come out of the oil to come out of the olives. So you begin the process umanicha, and then you simply leave it. And the hope is that because you have this pressure that's beginning to be on the olives, it'll continue to allow the oil to come out, or at least will retard whatever spoilage may happen. So this will get you through Chol Moed and Yantif, and then you can do it afterward later on. But if you didn't do this and simply let them out, right, because they've now ripe on both sides, so then it will begin to rot.
Keeps the air up, maybe.
It actually puts pressure on the olives. Yeah. Part of getting the oil out is keeping the pressure so that there's something trying to get the oil out. So manicha la'achar moed, you leave the beam on top of the zaytim until after Chol Moed, which means until after Yantif. Okay, this is Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara is going to learn from the Mishnah that that there's a difference actually between Chol Moed and between Avelut, right? Because you see that on Avelut he couldn't do anything. Now it's Chol Moed, it becomes permissible to do this. Now the process was he was novel, he couldn't do it. Now it turned to become Yantiv and Chol Moed. So Chol Moed we allow. Chol Moed stops the Avelus. So you see that Yantiv stops the Avelus, and Chol Moed now. So certain things were allowed. More things can be done on Chol Moed than can be done on Avelus. That's the rule that comes out. The Gemara is going to point out. So even on the days of Avelus, he couldn't even put on the first beam to begin the process at all. So this is the case. One followed the other. Rabbi Yossi says you actually can put the zaytim into the Beit Abad, and you can actually take the get the oil out as normally uvagomer, and you can squeeze them until you get all of the shemen out, the gaf, and you can even close the barrel that the oil is collected in kedarko, like you do it on the regular yantif. Okay, and we will see that Rabbi Yossi has a rule in general that if there's a hefsed, you're allowed to do things as they are. So Shitas Rabbi Yossi is when there's a hefsed davar ha'avad, you don't even need to make a shinoi. So the concern is if you're going to lose the olives or lose the oil, you can do it like normally. You just press them out like you would normally do. Okay. So that's about the first mission is about zaytim, and the next mission, which we'll get to, or we won't get to today, on Yud Bet, deals with the grapes. So the Gemara simply points out that if you look at the opening part of the Mishnah, it talks about the first line talks about Avel, and then the real topic is about holding off until after Chol Moed. So it starts with Avel. So Gemara says Pasach be'Avel, v'siyam b'Moed. It starts dealing with Avelus and ends up with Chol Moed. I mean, you normally would expect that one case would be on its own. Why not simply say something happened, you got to Yantif, and you couldn't do it, which is what the next piece is. But it starts by talking about Avelus, which means to tell us, says the Gemara, Rav Shisha, Braid Ravid. It's not two cases. One case leads into the other. Zot omeret, Dvarim hamutarm b'moed asurim b'me'evlo. Things that are permissible on Chol Moed are still prohibited on the days of being an Avel. Avel has a real prohibition of doing work. The Gemara is going to have a whole long discussion about what those exceptions are. But as a rule, an Avel does not go to work. An Avel doesn't do work and can't do work.
So Shiva.
An Avel in Shiva, correct. An Avel in Shiva. Now, what's the reason? Probably it's the reason of prohibition of Avelus, and it probably makes a whole lot of sense. You'll forget about your Avelus if you'll be working.
I thought you're not supposed to go to work because you need to feed yourself.
You need to feed yourself. You also need to focus maybe on what the Avelus is.
But I remember the halacha is that, and that's why you bring food in. People bring food in, and if they don't bring food in, it's a sad state of affairs. You have to go. I forget what it says that. If you have to go out and work, people should bring food into the shiva house.
Well, I don't know if that's the reason. That's simply a corollary. The fact that people should bring it in.
That's in the Lamb book. I remember in the Lamb book.
Well, we'll learn Avelus in the third paragraph. I think the reason is you'll forget about Avelus.
Oh, okay.
Right? Makes a lot of sense. So Ravashi Omar, now Ravashi, the first approach says it's telling me that Avelus is is prohibited, and Chol Hamoed is permissible. There's a second approach, exactly the opposite. Rav Ashi Amar, Lo Mi Boy Kamar. It starts talking about Aveilus, and then it ends up with Chol Hamoed. Rav Ashi says it's really almost like two cases, which means Lo Mi Boy B'mei Evlo D'Midrabanan Hu B'Shari. Now, when you're an Avel, in other words, if you became an Avel, the same thing would apply. In other words, the way to read the Mishnah is that you had your Zaytim and you became an Avel, or you had your Zaytim and you got stuck with Chol Hamoed. Not that one led to the other. Read them as almost parallel cases. And therefore, says Rav Ashi, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that really if I was an Avel, I could do a certain amount of malacha to start the process, which is putting the beam on top. That's all I can do. But not only I can do it for Aveilus, elafilu b'moed the isa malacha midaraisa b'midaraisa, that even though in Chol Hamoed where there's a certain prohibition of malacha midaraisa, it's not even clear what's really true that there is malacha isa malacha for Chol Hamoed. But makom seda shar rabban, where there's a law, chachamim allowed it. So in other words, according to the Rabbi Ashi in the second approach, really an Avel story alone would be the same thing. According to the first approach of the Gemara, there's the merit that a novel I couldn't even do this. So it's actually a real difference between the two approaches in terms of trying to understand how far what is permissible during the days of Aveilus or not. Which is the Oraisa? So Aveilus is only the Oraisa on the first day. The first day of only one day of Aveilus is Minat Torah. The rest of the other 7 days or 6 days are only rabbinic. People don't know this. Not to say you should belittle it. Right? So, which by the way means it's only the first day. The first day is usually after the Levaya until sunset. It's very short. It can sometimes be a very short period of time. Chol Hamoed goes back to the Torah and had certain prohibitions built into it. That's what the Gemara seems to say. I said, well, it's not that clear what the Yisr in the Torah is about Chol Hamoed. Which Yisr is the Min Torah for Chol Hamoed? And the answer is, I guess, certain things were defined, not the same kind of malacha as Shabbos and Yontif, but certain things that were difficult types of work were considered. Chazal understood this to be inherent in Chol Hamoed to be prohibited if it was not L'tzorach Yontif.
But we always think of that as the Rabbanan.
We always think of it as the Rabbanan. The Gemara seems to suggest it's Minat Torah. I agree. That's very unusual. I said it's hard for us to understand where it is, and if it's also to do it, how for the Davar Alva does something become permissible? And if it's prohibited, how can I do it now for eating on Chol Hamoed?
Actually, the leniency of losing something is a Rabbanan.
Yeah, correct.
So that you think that the Rabbanan.
So let me give you an example. Like we drive on Chol Hamoed, right? The answer is yes, we drive on Chol Hamoed because when we're driving, we're doing something. Hopefully, will help us for Chol Hamoed Yontif. I'm driving to shul. I'm taking the kids to I don't know, a amusement park, a museum. That's considered Tzorach Hamoed. Now, what would not be considered Tzorach Hamoed for driving? That's a good question. What would not be considered Tzorach Hamoed?
Going to work? No.
Well, you're going to work because probably if you didn't go to work, you may lose your job.
Driving car, taking it to be serviced.
Taking it to be serviced, okay.
Was an emergency, maybe.
Probably the best example is learning how to drive or practicing how to drive. Even though I know a lot of kids do their driving stuff on Chol Hamoed because that's when they're off. But probably driving lessons are probably not L'tzorach Hamoed. So, but driving, the definition of malacha is not the same definition of Shabbos. You can't drive on Shabbos. You can drive on Chol Hamoed.
You shouldn't do things that are not to.
Right, but there's,
things you can do later.
But that's actually, but it really extends itself. So if I get in the car, I don't have to say, I'm going to the store. I'm going to enjoy Yontif. I'm going to enjoy Chol Hamoed. So that becomes an extension. Therefore, we drive. I'm saying, but we had last week, the week before, talked about doing the nails or the hoofs of the donkeys. Right? We talked about the donkeys that were working in the mill for yantif or for to prepare the flour, and it was machlokas, if the donkey is not doing this kind of work, can you actually trim the hoofs? And the answer, and that really relates to the same thing. If it's a tzorach hamoed, you can do the malacha. It's not. So, but it's a very different kind of malacha definition of what malacha is. It's almost like avoda, hard work. I'm sorry? You should give us a course.
We don't study that.
We don't. It's true. Correct. Right. Right. There's I told you the sefer called Moed that Art Scroll put out. I actually have it. I really haven't gone through it yet. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's the point.
That's the point. Actually, it's on the short pile to go through. But it's actually a book was done many years ago by the Rosh Kollel of the Lakewood Kollel in Chicago, Rabbi Zucker and I forgot the other name. They did it as with a different publisher, and then it sat for about 20 years, and they republished it and added to it and improved it, and Art Scroll decided to publish it in a way which actually makes it very much nicer. So that's probably the best book to read about Chol Moed. But then has halachas one after the other. But you're right. We tend to look at Chol Moed as more Chol than Moed, and it also only occurs a couple of days in the year.
But we're also careful. Like I'm careful not to do things I don't have to do.
Right.
Like if I fix something, like house, car, whatever. I don't need. It's not an emergency. It just sits there,
right.
And after you end it gets done.
Right. I usually have this conflict because I mow my own grass and you never have enough time to do it. So it's always like the Yetzar says, mow it on Chol Moed. Now, mow it, okay? And the answer is I don't. Because it's not really a tzorach hamoed, unless the grass was so high that the city was going to fine me or something like that, or I couldn't use the backyard, but that's never the case. Remember, it's either going to be Pesach, where really nothing is growing yet. It's usually Sukkot. It's the end of the year, right? Or even for that matter, raking leaves. Right? It's really raking leaves in your backyard. If you rake your own leaves, is that really tzorach yantiv? The answer is not really tzorach yantiv. Okay. It's usually the leaf raking that gets me.
So when they
and that's different. That's difficult work. Right? That's hard work, raking leaves. Right?
When you had a Sanhedrin and they enforced for violating Shabbos, they could kill you for violating Shabbos. But you never hear of anything with, he didn't have to do that kind of work.
Because the answer is that probably most of what they were doing could be extended for tzorach hamoed. We just did the example with Rav and the fish. So that's a good example where Chazal look at things a lot more leniently. Right? You see, yes, he allowed them to get the fish, and yes, it really was, they weren't going to eat the fish right away, and yet he said, however, you can use it either because it's hefsed merub or because you could use it now, you could eat it now. Right. So that was, once again, doesn't mean you have to go shopping on Chol Moed and only get just one piece of bread for the next day.
One slice.
Right? One slice, you can get enough, there's leftover. Yeah. So that's I said it's not as definitive as malacha, lamatet malachot on Shabbos. That's clearly okay. Okay. So what do we have here? We have the first opinion was Rav Shisha braid Rav Ida. Rav Idi, which says on Avelus you can't do malach at all, on Chol Moed you can, and the second approach is the opposite of Rav Ashi. So Tanya Kavasi Rav Shisha braid Rav Idi. Elu dvarim shasuyim ha'osim la'avel b'mei evlo. The following are the things that you can do for an avel when he's an avelus. Okay. And they're as follows. Zeitav hafuchim tarnim lo. Let's see, where's the right going to be from? Alright, it's a long price. Okay. Zeitav hafuchim, if you've turned over the zeitim, tarnim lo, you can actually, I think this is the same thing, tarnim lo is you can begin to put the beam on top of it. Tarnim lo
So what's wrong with this? Why couldn't you do this?
It's giving you examples of things that you can do when you are an Avel, which if you didn't do,
You lose a lot of money.
you would lose a lot of money. Okay? Right. So let's do it again. Zeta v'afuchim tanim lo, v'chado loguf. Your kad is your barrel has to be bunged, has to be closed. And if you don't close it, the wine inside will go sour. Upishtano lahalot min hamishra, and you have pishton, you have flax plants that have to be taken out of the soaking water. This in order to make linen. They use flax plants which they put in some kind of water that made them rot until all that remained was the threads inside the flax plants. Utsmaro lahalot min hayora. The yora was the dyeing, the coloring basin. So you had your wool and you put it into the basin to get colored. If you didn't take it out, the dye would just keep soaking in. It would become a too dark color. Umarbitzin sadehu mishutigia onat hamayim shelo. And you can water the field when the time for watering the field comes along. This is for an Avel according to whom? According to the Chachamim. Okay?
The language says, Eilhun ha'oisim lo.
So we don't, sometimes the Avel, we do it for the Avel.
We do it
right?
for the Avel.
Right.
So implicitly the Avel can't do it for himself.
Correct. Thank you. Right. So this is what the Avel can't do, and we have to do it for the Avel. Okay, Acherim do it, but he can't do it. So you see, this is the proof to Rav Shisha Braid Rav Idi that the Avel cannot do these things. Other people do it for him. In other words, even though one could argue, for example, you can't say that, well, I can't cook on Shabbos, someone else will cook for me on Shabbos. Right? So therefore, Avelos, I can't do it, but someone else who's not an Avel is allowed to do it for me. Okay? Even though it's my property, even though I stand to benefit from it. So the first opinion looks very close to what Rav Shisha Brei Rav Idi. Rav Yehuda Omer, Av Zorin Lo Soden Nir. Rav Yehuda adds other things. You can even plant a field that's been plowed. They plowed the field, and when you plow it, the soil's been broken up, it becomes an Avel. So what happens if you don't plant it now? You're going to lose. You lose the season. Right? Otherwise you got to go back again and plow the whole field again. The earth will get hard.
But it's just a few days. It's not just for 1 day.
Well, the season is
1 day, so you lose it.
Not 1 day, it's 7 days.
But he said the first day was the...
But when the Avel can't do it, he can't do it for the entire week.
Probably
so he will lose the week, and whatever it is, that's just the...
to plant.
Right, so if you keep it a whole week probably without planting, you probably have to replow the whole thing, and by the time you replow the whole thing, you may lose the planting season. Okay? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. V'sada homedes lepishtan, and you can plant a field that was plowed and a field that's waiting for pishtan, for flax to be planted. Once again, this had a very specific season, and it will need to be planted early. So Amrulo said, Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, we disagree with your examples about planting now the field that was just plowed, or planting now the pished on the flax plants. Im lo tiz rabba bachir, tiz rabba efel. If you didn't plant early, you'll plant late. So, like you said, so you missed the season, so you plant. You planted a month later. You plant something else. It doesn't mean you can plant the same thing, by the way. Right? There are different seasons and different lengths. So if you wait a couple of weeks, you may have to plant a different crop. So you plant a different crop. You can't plant flax because it's too late in the season until you get back on track. Plant something else. Okay.
You have flax seeds or whatever. Maybe you have certain flax seeds or whatever you need.
Well,
to plant, you need.
So seeds, it doesn't look like seeds were a problem in those days. It looks like the issue was more the working the land and from watering and irrigation. Remember, everything is much smaller. This is not like mega farms where you have to have.
But what I'm saying is, it's easy for someone to say you plant something else, but maybe you can't. You know what I mean?
I guess it's what Rabbi Yehuda said. You got flax seeds, so go plant flax.
But nowadays you can't, because whatever crop you've got equipment, which is expensive stuff, which is specific for the crop.
Right.
So if you're changing over from, I don't know, tobacco to corn, you've got a huge investment, the farmer's got a huge investment in equipment.
Yeah. But I mean, even those
These
days,
days,
Those days you invested in an ox and a plow, and a lot of backbreaking labor. Yeah. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Rav Shimon Gamliel, third opinion, Zeitav Hafuchim v'Ein Sham Uman Elahu. If once again, the corollary is there's nobody else. In other words, he's turned over his olives, and the first opinion was the Chachamim to get people to do it for him, but there's no one around. Or Kado Loguf, where he's got a barrel that has to be closed. V'Ein Sham Uman Elahu, he's the only guy around. Or Pishtana La'alos Min HaMishra, or he's got flax plants in the soaking water. With Smaro Lahalos Min HaYora, where he has wool that's soaking in the dyeing basin. The Ancient Uman Elahu, and he's the only one around. So which means you can't go say someone else will do it. Who does it? Hareza Yaseh B'tzina. He does it B'tzina when no one's around, or he does it maybe in the evening when no one's watching. In other words, he respects people, he respects the concept he shouldn't be doing this, it has to be done, so he does it, but he's not proud about it. Okay? So there are certain extenuating circumstances, says Rav Shimon Gamliel, where he can do it if he's the only guy. Because if he doesn't do it, it's mamish a hefsid meruba. It's mamish davar avod. Yes, or arcane. In fact, by the way, that's why there maybe has certain material for an avel is like a real hefsid, may be able to go into work. Not the first day, maybe not even the first 3 days, but
I'm going to bring in next time the lamb book, because I remember. Let me
bring in the art scroll book. It's got everything. Everything that's principal also.
Art scroll?
Everything is got. One opinion says this, one opinion says that.
No, but the lamb book I like because the lamb book is.
It doesn't give you a yes. It's
it
good.
Just gives it to you. So this is what we do, and you do what you feel. Like this is what we normally do. This you do what you feel. It gives you halacha, but everything else is good.
All right. Good. Yeser Arcane, more. Yeser Arcane Amar Rav Shimon Gamliel. Imhaya Uman Larabim. If this person was a communal artisan, he was needed. In other words, it's not about his own personal need, the need of the tzibor, tzarchei tzibor, such as, he was, let's say, I don't know, a communal worker, or a sapar. Sapar is a barber. Or a balan. Balan was the bathhouse attendant, which was a very not such a great job, but was very needed. You couldn't close the bathhouse down. The sapar or balan l'rabim, the yeh etaregel. Now it goes back to Yontiv. It became the time for Yontiv. The Ancient Uman Elahu, and it's Yontiv, and everybody's got to get a haircut, and everybody's got to go to the bathhouse, and everybody has to do this. And he's the only guy. Hareza Yaseh. So that is permissible. That's already kind of overturns his Avelos because of the communal need. Okay? Very similar to Chol Moed. Okay, let's do a couple more lines. A very long brisa. Harisim v'hakachirim v'hakablanim. These are different types of sharecroppers. An aris gets a percentage. A chachirin gets, I think, gets a field to work on, and whatever he gets is his. And Aris gets a percentage. Chachirin get a percentage of the field, but what they get out of that field is up to them. And Kablanim, I think, get a flat fee. But they're all three variations on a person who is working for someone else. And he has a schayvus, an obligation, not for himself, for someone else. So, if he becomes an avel, hare elu yasu achirim b'shvilan. Others should do the work for them. He can't work the field. He's got to get others to work his field on those days because it's not his loss. The loss will be as well for the owner. He will lose, right? But the owner will lose because the owner set up this deal with the oris. Okay. Hachamarim, hagamolim, v'hasapanim. Chamarim are the donkey drivers. Gamolim are the camel drivers. Sapanim are boat drivers, boatmen. Harei lo yaseh. They don't do work at all. However, timhayu mucharim o muskarim, it's lacherim. But if they are working for other people, they're hired for other people. Harei elo yaseh. Then they do work. So the rule is here: if someone else will have a loss, and I'm an avel, I have to work. Okay. And let's do a little more here. It's all this long brisa. Schir yom, afilu bi'acheres lo yaseh. Schir yom is a person who's paid by the day. Day laborer. So it's not like a kablan. All the previous examples where the guy had a deal to be the worker and to be the bathhouse attendant and to be the wagon driver and the donkey driver, those were long-term kablanas. This is about the day labor. Afilu bi'ir acheres lo yaseh. Even if he's in another city where people won't know that he's working, where he's an avel, so it looks like it could be like sinna really. People are not going to see, but still, he can't do it. Even if he had committed to be the day laborer, because a day laborer has a lot of rights that he can back out. If he has other people's work, he can back out. He can yodo ala yona on the pole. So therefore, if he doesn't work, he can normally quit. A day laborer can normally quit.
He's doing this for somebody else.
He's doing it for someone else, but he's getting paid. Right.
So when we back out,
So the guy will hire another day laborer. As opposed to a guy who has a normal job, it's hard to fill that position. It's a skilled job. Schir yom was usually unskilled, and it was hired for the day. This guy didn't come and hire someone else.
But also, the other guys who the sharecroppers, and it's a long-term project is on there. The whole planting and the harvest.
So you can't just bail out in the middle.
Right.
Schir yom, the law says the guy doesn't come today. The boss will go down to the employment office and hire some more people. He'll lose a couple hours, but he won't lose he won't lose the project. On the other hand, the guy is a kablan or an aris, he's in it for the whole season. If he has work, people gave him work to work at home. He's paid by the piece. He's a piecemeal worker. He's not paid by the day or by the hour. He's paid, let's say, to make a pair of pants. And he took it home. Even though he's a kablan, lo yaseh, he can't do it because it's in his house. So the Gemara says, First the Gemara says, even though if he's a kablan, and surely if it's not a kablan, the Gemara says, Adrabah, kibolet kididei dami. No, a kablan is really looks like he's working for himself. He sets his own time. So surely it should be. The two of them are different. So Gemara says, "Elaima bein bekibolet bein shena kibolet." Whether he's doing it as a kablan or whether he's being paid to work at his home, the fact that it's his house doesn't make it permissible lo yaseh. Okay, and let's just do two more lines to finish the brayta. Haita malachto biyad acherem. If his work is with someone else is doing the work for him. The first case was he can't do work for someone else as a kablan. What if he has someone else who's doing the work for him? He's the Ovel. So Beveso Yaseh, in his house, the Ovel's house, the guy can't work. Bevaydacher Yaseh.
Why not?
Because it's a house of Avela, so people don't work.
It's not appropriate.
But even though he's not doing it, it's Biyad Acherim. So nonetheless he can't do it, because they're afraid, because the Rashi says they're afraid that people will say that he may be helping the guy who's doing the work. So if the guy comes to my house and then become a novel, he can't do it in my house because people say, why is he doing it in my house? I'm really helping him when no one's looking. In his own, but if I give him work to do in his own house, then he's okay, yasu. Okay? So, and there are a number of examples, number of cases which will be building upon this brisa about this. So here's the key. If it's a loss, what looks like it's a loss to the Ovel, he takes the loss. If other people become affected by it, so it becomes permissible. And so the Gemara is going to take this example and talk about Avelis, about examples where this looks like there are those differences that come up.
So you said that's the first day, that's all 7 days?
It's all 7 days, all 7 days.
So you said it was...
So the Gemara said that at first it thought that even though Avelis is Min HaTorah, it meant only the first day. But really the law applies to all 7.